Character is what you do when nobody's watching.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rebbe Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Uvracha. In this week's Parsha, there is a very interesting juxtaposition that the Gemara brings down between the laws of Nazir, which is a person who vows to abstain from wine and any other grape products, and that comes immediately following the laws of Soita, which is a suspected unfaithful wife. The Gemara in Soita Daf Beis Amud Aleph explains that a person that witnesses the whole ceremony of a woman that perhaps seems to be unfaithful to her husband, or there's at least a chashash, and she goes through a very disgracing ceremony, one who HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrates it, that he witnesses such a thing, then the Gemara says he should take on becoming a Nazir, i.e. refraining from wine and any grapes products. So I saw Rabbi Yisachar Frand shares an unbelievable insight, and he asks, why? Why does one have to do with the other? Why does abstaining from wine, why is that the appropriate response to witnessing adultery? Well, what does that one have to do with the other? So it brings the Zohar. The Zohar says, even though we know there's a three-way argument as to what was the tree of knowledge that Adam and Chava ate from, the first sin in humanity that Adam ate from and consumed, there's a three-way machlokes. Was it wheat? Was it an olive tree? Or the third opinion is that it was actually a grapevine. The Zohar goes with this mahalach, that it's a grapevine, and he says, the reason it's fitting that the Nazir should abstain from grapes in such a scenario where he sees the soita is because, from a certain perspective, it's correcting and rectifying the original sin that Adam HaRishon did. Rav Shimon Schwab explains that when Adam HaRishon ate from this tree, to a certain extent, on his level, of course, because Adam HaRishon was a very, very, very extremely highly spiritual person, but to a certain degree, by him going against the commandment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it diminished his tzelem Elokim, his divine image. Because being created in Hashem's image, it means that you possess this very unique human ability to control your passion, as opposed to being controlled by them. Rabbi Yaakov Ruderman brings down the pasuk in Koheles, and he learns in a very interesting way. He says, the pasuk in Koheles says that what a person has over an animal is ayin. Ayin literally means nothing. So there's different ways of explaining what this means. But he explains that ayin, it hints to this idea that what a person has the ability to do, which an animal doesn't, is not to blindly follow its instincts, but rather be able to say no to certain temptations. An animal goes whatever their instinct is, but a person has the ability to distinguish between different temptations, and when something is not allowed or not permissible, to be able to say no. Now let's go back to Soita. Soita also, to a certain degree, diminished her tzelem Elokim by even putting herself in a position that she went to be with the person that she was already warned not to go with him, and she went to a private place with him. So also too, she went blindly following her temptations to a certain extent, which, by the way, also explains this unique punishment of public humiliation. She's being humiliated in public. They tore her clothes. Her hair is suddenly uncovered. And if you look carefully, in Jewish law, typically we ensure to have a merciful punishment that won't embarrass the person. But this is the exception. The Talmud Yerushalmi, Nedarim, Daf, Kaf, Tes Amud Aleph, the Soita is different because she doesn't have the tzelem Elokim to the same extent she had before this action that she did. And hence she's different because she has already humiliated the divine image within herself, her tzelem Elokim. And hence, this is Yotzeh Min HaKlal. And that's why this is a very unique situation when the Torah does allow to embarrass her in public. Exactly for this reason. This also goes well with what the Talmud Yerushalmi tells us in Nedarim, Daf Kaf Tes Amud Aleph, that accepting to be a Nazir after witnessing a Soita is actually the exception of avoiding unnecessary prohibitions. Because over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is signaling to you, I want you to participate in rectifying the sin of Adam HaRishon. Of course, this is a very practical concept because we have different dimensions in our lives where we have to set boundaries and know this is what Hashem said we should do and this is what Hashem said we shouldn't do. I always like to look at life as an infinite loop because back in the day I used to be a programmer. An infinite loop where you always say, wait a second, this new situation that came up to me, is this Ratzon Hashem? If yes, then do it. If it's clear that it's not, then don't do it. Don't be like an animal, just let your instinct follow your instincts. However, sometimes there is gray and you're not really sure what the right thing to do. So if you have a good friend, like Rabbeinu Yoina says, you acquired a good friend, so ask him, what do you think the right thing for me to do is? And a lot of times your friend can tell you the answer because he's not biased at all. But if you don't even have the answer from there, you ask your Rav, the Rav that knows you, that you hold by, and he'll help you. He'll be the vessel by which to know what Ratzon Hashem is. We have to make sure that that is the way to live life, and not chas v'shalom to be like an animal, that one just follows their instinct. I would like to end off with a short story of one of my Talmidim that recently confided in me. He confided in me about the following experience that I think perfectly captures this concept that we're saying. He was rushing through a grocery store parking lots. This is a while back in America. Not a while back, a couple years ago, when he discovered suddenly an envelope on the floor. The curiosity got the best of him and he opened up the envelope and he saw $2,300 with the notes over there that said, this is the rent money for mom's apartment. He looked around, there's no cameras, no witnesses, nothing. And to top it all off, he wasn't in such a good financial state. His own rent was overdue, his children needed winter coats, and his wife just lost her job. Nobody would know, he said. He had this inner voice saying to him. But then he told me that his grandmother's voice, Alei Shalom, was echoing in his mind. Character is what you do when nobody's watching. That is the real test to see if you're an Eved Hashem. It wasn't easy for him, but he walked over to the customer service over there and gave that envelope with $2,300. 3 days later, the owner called him, a nursing supervisor who had just posted a job opening. And she said to him, after what you did, I know exactly the kind of person you must be. When can you start? That night, tucking his children into bed with the promise of new coats from his coming paycheck, he understood this vote that we're saying today. Saying no to temptations doesn't close doors, it opens ones we never knew existed. Like the Nazir, who restricts himself from wine, sometimes our greatest freedom comes from our most difficult ability to say no. Yeh Ratzon will all choose to be a human, B'Tselem Elokim, a Yid, the Keser of the Tselem Elokim, the crown of the Tselem Elokim, and not chas v'shalom, an animal. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.